Hello, good morning. Welcome to Scotty's Toy Box. I wanted to take a few minutes here to talk to everybody about gun control and gun regulation. We've just had another tragic shooting in Florida where 17 people lost their lives, adults and young people. I think this is happening so much, so often, where people are losing their lives to mass shootings, that we can have an honest, open conversation. I don't care if you're Republican. I don't care if you're Libertarian. I don't care if you're Democrat. I don't care if you're progressive. People die from bullets regardless of political party. And bullets are thrown by guns. Let's be honest about it. And in that vein, I heard somebody say, well, a car can be used for killing. Yes, but a car also has another legitimate use. And see, people then turn around and say, well, what about hunting? That's a legitimate use. Yes, for some people it is. But you don't hunt with an AR-15 assault weapon. You're not going out there to have a military assault on squirrels or deer. Deer don't. An AR-15 is a military-style weapon based on military weapons which are designed to kill people, a lot of people, as many as possible, because that's what the military tries to do when they are either defending or attacking. So, no, hunting is not a legitimate use. People say, well, people can kill. I heard this one on watching the news, and one of these congressmen tried to say, I think it was Trey Gowdy, said, well, you can kill with a shovel. Okay. What do you think would have happened had that young man pulled the fire alarm and then standing there with a shovel started trying to kill as many students as come out? That was my cat. As soon as I started this video, he wanted to be part of it. Anyway, there wouldn't be 17 dead people right now. Again, a shovel is not designed for mass killing. An assault weapon is. Now, just banning assault weapons won't get rid of the entire problem, but it is a first start. It is one of the best starts. They say a journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step. And my exercise program of riding my bicycle starts with me going out the door and getting the bike out. It's a start. We have no use for military-style weapons in the civilian population. All right. So somebody says, well, I need it. What do you need it for? In case the government goes tyrannical. All right, Mr. G.I. Joe, you in your neighborhood are going to stand up to military drones, tanks, missiles, rockets, a division. If nation states, if terrorist groups cannot stand up to the U.S. military, little Joe, G.I. Joe civilian with his couple of pistols and an AR-15 is not going to, all he's going to do is shoot a few innocent people and probably some police officers. There are ways to deal with a government that's out of control, and we do that. It's called elections. Moving away from that, I wanted to talk on some of the things that I have heard other people say that we should do, and these are normally politicians. One of them is our president. They say silly things like, oh, we're just going to make background checks more stringent. They forget that this administration, this president, undid the Obama-era rule that banned or stopped people with severe mental health issues from getting guns. was part of the background checks. This president, who has a hatred for everything that President Obama did, because obviously he was a real president and a thinking, intelligent man who also happened to be black, is something that this white racist president can't stand. So now he says, oh, but I'm going to implement, I've directed him to implement stronger background checks. You undid the rule, you remake the rule. That's action. You can do it. You're responsible, you fix it. Also, resources. You're going to have background checks. There's two things you got to do. First, get rid of this 3 days or they get it anyway crap. It takes more than 3 days to get a test back from a high school or a teacher or whatever normally. Takes 3 days to find out whether you've passed any major test. You want to do a background check on something like a gun, you take more time if you need it. Resources. Let's put the money into it. Let's get the investigators. Let's get the databases set up. You can't ask for a background check for just nothing. Who's going to run it? Who's going to be responsible for the database? Who's going to actually be responsible that it's available when the people need to do the background check? Who's going to be responsible for following up when somebody sells a gun without a background check? These are all questions. These all need answers. One of the worst things I've heard is arming teachers. The president who calls for this said he didn't say arming teachers. He said concealed guns carried by teachers who are trained. Well, geez, I hope he wasn't just going to have every teacher carry a gun like pencils and chalk. But that doesn't matter. It's an incredibly stupid idea. All right. First of all, states and the federal government are not providing enough resources financially for teachers and schools to operate even at a perfunctory level. Teachers are having to give in their own salaries for supplies. Textbooks are old and crappy. School hardware is run down. We have a real education crisis in this country, and yes, part of it is shooting, but the other part of it is these students are not getting a good education because of the fact that we're not putting the effort of money in. It's more important to give a wealthy person a tax cut and break of thousands and millions of dollars than it is to fund the textbooks our children need, the computers they need, the paper and pens and pencil supplies they need. Wealthy school districts have much better test rates than that. Why? Because the kids have the resources. So now you say, well, I want to stop these shootings. I want to give certain teachers guns. Okay, so the teachers, let's just follow this out. The teachers agree to go and spend much of their time training. Now, is this training paid for? Again, where's the resources? Who buys the guns? Who buys the ammo? Who pays for the training classes? But they get them. They're there. Alrighty, now they have their gun. Where do they start when they're in class? Do they carry it all the time? You know, I used to carry a gun for a living. And I can't tell you how many times I heard of somebody taking their gun belt off and hanging it on the hook on the stall door of a toilet so they could go to the bathroom, getting done, doing their pants up, and walking out and leaving their frickin' gun belt hanging from that hook. So don't tell me it won't happen with teachers. Carrying a gun can be uncomfortable, especially if you're not an in-shape person. So, again, where do they put it? Do they keep it in a locked drawer in their desk? Do they keep it in their briefcase? Does Mrs. Johnson of the 3rd grade class keep it in her pocketbook? What I'm trying to say here is it's not secure. Kids will get a hold of it. kids don't understand, especially younger kids. That's what I'm talking about right here. Younger children do not understand the deadly effects of guns. And because their parents or their society glorifies them, they will look at them, they will play with them. And if they know that Mr. Johnson has one in his desk drawer, when Mr. Johnson's back is turned, some kid's going to open up that desk drawer and have that gun. Now, as any real gun professional, or I should say, let me just rephrase that, tripped over my own tongue, sorry about that. Anybody who carried a gun professional knows that you got a real dangerous situation. You carry one in the chamber. That's why when you unload your gun, you first drop the clip, and then you slide the action. Okay? Because that gun is armed even without a clip in it. You've got one in the chamber. If you're supposed to have that gun at a second's notice, you have to have one in the chamber. God help us, a kid gets a hold of that. That gun's going to go off, and somebody is very easily could be hurt. So I'm being serious with you right here. That's a really bad idea. And if it's not loaded, that's delay time in getting it loaded. The time the teacher needs to take to protect the students by getting them in the classrooms, getting them locked down, getting windows closed, getting doors locked. They have these programs and they've thought them out for a reason. Peter Wang died because he was holding the door so other students could get into a secure room. He was shot before he could get in. He's a hero. But that's what the teachers were doing also. They were holding doors, getting their kids in there. They're heroes. They don't have time to run out in the hallway and play OK Corral. So let's just look at that problem one time. Anybody remember how long and wide high school hallways were? And you got a guy at one end, fire alarm, kids pouring out of the room, and teachers with them, and all of a sudden, the guy at the other end of the room, the guy who pulled the fire alarm, starts shooting. Well, the teacher now, one of the 20% or so, even a security officer armed and ready at the other end of the hall has all of these people between them, all sizes and shapes, all milling around, all screaming. He can't fire until the other person shows a threat. So the other person shows a threat and all heck breaks loose. Unless you are behind or right beside the person, you've got no way to fire back. You pull your weapon, right? Try to get a sight. Who you're going to end up shooting in all that excitement, all that adrenaline, all that running around. You had a clear shot 1/6 of a second ago, but now there's a kid standing where you just pulled the trigger. It's a really bad idea to add more accelerant to a fire. Oh, my house is on fire? Here, let me throw some gasoline on it. Add more. I'm sorry, but it just upsets me when people don't think through the problem. All right, so Mr. Johnson, he's concealed carrying. He's got it in his holster under his overcoat, and assailant pulls out a weapon, starts to shoot into the students. Mr. Johnson, he's standing somewhat close to the shooter. He opens his coat, he pulls out his pistol and takes a few rounds from the shooter, who realizes that he's armed. Shooter's already got his gun ready and is already spraying bullets. Somebody with a pistol is not going to be much of a deterrent for that. And let's talk one last thing before I close this down. Deterrent. They say that this current shooter cried, sobbed, and was very remorseful in jail. I'm sure he was. But the problem he had was emotional control and anger management issues, mental health issues from a long time. The boy couldn't control himself. He needed help to do that. Do you think he thought about the consequences of what would happen after he pulled those weapons, or pulled that weapon and shot those people? He wasn't thinking of that. He knew that his insides were on fire, his mind was aflame, and he did an act. Afterwards, when he had time to think about it and what it really meant, of course he's sorry, he's remorseful. So deterrents aren't really going to work in this situation. The brain is not developed fully until we're in our 20s. We know that now. Science has proven that. Kids are, even young adults, have judgment issues. Some are much more mature than others, as we know. And I'm very impressed with some of these students that are speaking out. But you can see just in them the different maturity levels, the different understanding levels. I'm not saying they don't understand the situation. I'm saying that their reactions and how they're dealing with it are different. And it's the same with those struggling to get along in the world, to understand and accept, to deal with their issues, their mental health issues, their anger issues, their frustration levels, the fact that their bodies are on fire with changing hormones. So saying that they may be shot is not a real deterrent. Heck, most of them that get into these situations want somehow it just to end. So arming the teachers is a horrible idea. Background checks, you're going to have to do more than just say we'll have stricter background checks. You're going to have to rewrite the laws for the timing and how it's done and who gets to do it and what information is available. When it comes right down to it, the solution starts, not ends, but starts with the banning of assault military type weapons. Nobody needs to have them except the military and maybe police that are on SWAT and tactical teams. Look, but for one last thing to think about on that, people say to me, well, you know, freedom, my Second Amendment right. Nobody's taking that right from you. We are putting common sense limits on it, and every right has limits. You're not allowed to have a military active weapon tank. You don't get your own tank, even if you can afford it. When you buy a Humvee, the first ones that were the real military ones, they didn't come with the M50s or other rocket launchers and that on them, like the military has. You don't get military rockets, and you don't get military missiles, and you don't get military armed drones as a public citizen. You don't get military-style assault weapons, or at least you shouldn't. In a civilian, progressive society that really values our children, we can make that first step. We can make that sacrifice for a better community for all of us. Thank you. This has been Scotty from Scotty's Toy Box, and I hope you like this video. I hope that if you do like my videos, you will subscribe or perhaps give comments. But don't worry, I probably will make them anyway, whether you like them or not. Alrighty, this is Scotty. Goodbye and hugs.